Tune into Nice Radio every Saturday at 7:30 a.m. for A View from the Outside, hosted by Brereton Horne. A View from the Outside takes a look at key issues affecting St. Vincent and the Grenadines and gives a global perspective on how these issues are viewed. Host Brereton Horne will examine a variety of topics to enlighten, stimulate debate, and explore solutions. Hear the facts, hear the real-life stories, hear A View from the Outside. Join Brereton Horne at 7:30 a.m. every Saturday on Nice Radio for A View from the Outside.
This society needs a spectacle. It might help us to see some people.
On A View from the Outside this week being the 2nd of January 2021, we look at Brace for Impact, with the view being that Vincentians are encouraged to heed the warning signs and utterances and to brace for impact in view of the financial and economic rocky days, months, and possibly years which lie ahead. Brace for impact is a term which is particularly known and used in the commercial aviation industry. It is a phrase which is announced by the pilot and flight attendants to passengers in the event that the aircraft has to make an emergency landing. The brace for impact position is meant to deliver maximum protection against the risk of head trauma, and it is believed that head trauma is significantly reduced when passengers are in that position during a crash. The rationale for assuming that position is that the less head trauma means more conscious passengers, which is critical for quick evacuation. So, when passengers brace for impact during a crash landing, they give themselves the best chance of survival during a crash. It is bearing the primary purpose of the phrase brace for impact in mind why we on A View from the Outside now encourage our fellow Vincentians to prepare for the tough times which the head of the regime has warned Vincentians lie ahead. The year 2020 has ended. It has been a year in which misery was experienced and continues to be experienced by many the world over. It has been a year when the pandemic brought on by the COVID-19 virus caused death and untold pain in many countries in the world. In the USA alone, it has caused the death of nearly 350,000 people. 2020 has been a year when the cruise tourism industry came to a complete halt, and it disrupted the lives and livelihoods of hundreds of thousands around the world, including many Vincentians. 2020 has been a year when the world seemingly stood still and prevented travel, particularly air travel, in the usual way. It has been a year when the words and phrases pandemic, masks, face coverings, washing of hands, quarantine, Google Classroom, social media, online learning, etc., assume prominence on the lips of almost everyone, almost everywhere. For Vincentians, COVID-19 did not cause the death and destruction seen around the world. In fact, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, there have been no official deaths attributed to COVID-19. In fact, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, there have been no deaths officially attributed to COVID-19. And it is hoped that with such statistics, Vincentians do not assume a false sense of security and an air of invincibility and become complacent. 2020 has gone, but COVID-19 and many of the perils associated with it still prominently remain around the world. COVID-19 is not to be scoffed at. COVID-19 is not to be mocked and used as a basis to ask Jah to lick them with diseases. The impact and continued threat of COVID-19 around the world is glaringly visible. It is therefore more important now than ever, imperative even, for Vincentians to brace for impact. Brace for the impact of COVID-19. Observe the protocols of wearing masks, washing hands, social distancing, adhering to quarantine orders, etc., so that the physical trauma which could be caused by that deadly disease is significantly reduced. For Vincentians, 2020 has gone, but the Lassophre volcano, which started to erupt effusively in the latter days of 2020, continues to threaten with the possibility of an explosive eruption. With the imminent threat of a possible explosive eruption of the volcano, Vincentians, especially those living in areas nearest to the volcano and in the danger zones, have been put on high alert to be prepared and ready. In other words, you have been asked to brace for impact to help lessen the possible damage which could be caused should an explosive eruption occur. Listen and heed the warnings. Ensure that your flashlights and transistor radios have batteries and are working. Ensure that your mobile phones are charged and that you have credit on your phones. Pack your valuables, including your identification documents, and be prepared to move out quickly and travel lightly if and when you're asked to do so. For Vincentians, in particular, the majority of the Vincentian electorate, 2020 was a year in which many thought and truly believed there would have been a change of government in the country. Well, despite the fact that the majority of Vincentians voted for the New Democratic Party, the NDP, the change did not come. The Westminster-style parliamentary democracy practiced in the country means that despite the fact that the Unity Labour Party, the ULP, did not get the majority of the votes during the general elections of the 5th of November 2020, they won the government because they managed to secure more seats, 9 to 6, winning one of those seats by a single vote. With the disappointment of the 2020 election results, most Vincentians remain disappointed. In the words of the leader of the opposition, Dr. Godwin Friday, the majority are disappointed, but not despondent. They are disappointed because they feel that the country and its people have been denied, robbed even, again, the chance of having a government of their choice, which will better manage the economy and the affairs of the country. They are disappointed because they witnessed a regime squander millions of dollars on the election campaign. Many say to bribe voters, while the health service and the healthcare facilities remain critical, particularly for the poor people in the country. They are disappointed because they are aware that the regime buried the results of the poverty assessment rather than facing the reality and putting measures in place to protect the indigent and poor and the vulnerable in society. They are disappointed because they still have a regime in place which they know by their very deed and practice will continue to victimize Vincentians, and they will continue to suck the energy and the life out of those whom they perceive do not support them. They are disappointed because they are wondering who will be next to have their land confiscated, like Simone Murray and her husband, Dr. Wayne Murray, and their family had their lands taken away from them in dubious circumstances. They are disappointed because there remains in place a regime which ruthlessly and callously destroyed the multi-million-dollar business of Bigger Bigs and disrupted the lives and livelihood of his 60-plus employees. They are disappointed because there remains in place a regime which refuses to honor court orders and pay the citizens whom they have wronged. Randolph Toussaint, the former commissioner of police, has died without receiving the compensation which the court ordered against the regime for having confiscated or compulsorily acquired his property. Marcus de Freitas is suffering a similar fate. He continues to wait in vain, it seems, for payment for his property, which the regime confiscated over a decade ago. They are disappointed because there remains in place a regime that continues to undermine the rule of law in the country and refuses to obey the Constitution, the highest law of the land, and provide accountability to the people as mandated by the said Constitution. The majority of Vincentians are disappointed because despite having squandered millions of dollars during the election campaign, the leader of the regime has already put out a warning that there are tough times ahead for the country and its people. The signs of those tough times have already been manifested in the fact that the regime has already gone to Parliament just 1 month after the elections and 1 month before the next budget to secure a loan of $125 million, a loan which the Vincentian taxpayer has to repay. It is therefore with all of those signs and utterances outlined above in mind that we, on A View from the Outside, see it appropriate to encourage all Vincentians, and particularly those living at home in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, to brace for impact. Brace for impact for the tough times which lie ahead, because you have already been alerted that there are going to be tough times ahead. Brace for impact because those in the Vincentian diaspora are feeling the financial pinch and economic squeeze, and they may soon not be able to sustain the lines at MoneyGram, Western Union, and other financial institutions in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Brace for impact because they may soon be willing but unable to continue to prop up the Vincentian economy. Brace for impact in the knowledge that the blows will continue to be harder than usual. Vincentians, brace. Brace for impact. To brace for impact does not mean to sit idly by and allow the regime to hoodwink and bamboozle you. To brace for impact does not mean to sit in silence and not speak up and speak out about the many ills which continue to plague the Vincentian society. To brace for impact does not mean to ignore the plight of those who are dispossessed and victimized. To brace for impact does not mean to sit and hope that things will get better. In fact, on the contrary, to brace for impact is to take decisive action. To brace for impact is to speak up and speak out about the ills which plague the country and its people. To brace for impact is to hold the regime accountable for public spending. Hold them accountable for that $125 million which they have now added as an extra burden on the backs of Vincentians. To brace for impact is not to let up. To brace for impact is to remain in the struggle until positive results are achieved. Justin and all of the listeners, until next week, this is Brereton Horne with a view from the outside, with a reminder to send your feedback as usual to aviewfromtheoutside@hotmail.com. We also invite you to visit and like our Facebook page at A View From The Outside, and also visit and subscribe to our YouTube channel at JMB Horne. Justin and all of the listeners, have a pleasant Saturday, a wonderful Sunday, and a productive week ahead, with everyone taking the action necessary to brace for impact. Happy New Year to you, Justin, and to everyone.